Ladies and gentlemen, just when you think the Dragon Ball hype cycle is slowing down, we are picking things back up. It is going crazy out here. We have our first look at Black Frieza in Xenoverse 2. I say Black Frieza, but in the same way that they did Ultra Ego Vegeta as Ultra Supervillain Vegeta, this is Ultra Supervillain Frieza, otherwise known as Temu Black Frieza. We'll be talking about this as well as a first look at the Broly gameplay, and then we'll be getting into the Dragon Ball presence at Jump Festa. We'll be talking about Toppo's first gameplay reveal for the Dragon Ball Gekishin Squadra video game, and then we'll be getting into Torishima's comments he made a short time ago about Dragon Ball Daima. Alright, so getting into this first look, which was leaked on the website, so they literally leaked that this Temu Black Frieza was coming to the game on the website accidentally. They did not mean for this to go up because they were, I guess, keeping it a surprise, like how they kept the regular Broly a surprise, which is very interesting how they did two versions of Broly for the future saga. But anyway, this Broly, we already had a gameplay reveal that we'll be breaking down, so we'll kind of skip over him for now. But as you can see with this Frieza, his chest piece is black, just like how Black Frieza's chest piece is black in the manga. Looks like his wrists here are also black. And then there's a bit of a darker golden color across the rest of his body. And it looks like his head is same color as Golden Frieza's head normally is. So, this pose, funnily enough, is the exact same pose that Black Frieza has in the manga. So if you take a look here, I've taken the liberty of pulling up the actual manga page in color and comparing it to how he looks in this first look. This is obviously Temu Black Frieza. Now, I would obviously prefer the actual Black Frieza, but obviously with how things are going with Dragon Ball and how they've been going, that's obviously not in the cards. And as I've said before, I think the reason why they're probably most likely developing Xenoverse 3 is because they've realized they reached the end of Xenoverse 2's life cycle. If they're having to basically create new characters that are just Temu versions of the characters from the Dragon Ball Super manga. So, with all that said, guys, are you excited for the Temu version of Black Frieza, aka Ultra Supervillain Frieza, Black Frieza? Very interesting stuff. Now, this is interesting, but they actually went ahead and revealed Broly DB Super coming to Future Saga Chapter 3 DLC, dropping October 30th in Xenoverse 2. With top-tier stats and versatile skills, he's built to dominate any battle. Get ready to unleash his ultimate power. So, I'm not going to break down this gameplay or anything like. Broly, looks like they did pretty good, if I do say so myself. They did not mess up on Broly, I don't think. Now, obviously they're keeping the Temu Black Frieza a surprise, I'm guessing, for closer to release. So if they release another gameplay reveal of him before the DLC trailer, before the DLC officially releases, we'll go ahead and we'll check that out on the channel as well. So, next up, let's talk about Dragon Ball Super at Jump Festa 2026. So, if you guys remember, they did a Jump Festa previously, or some sort of jump event, and they didn't have a Dragon Ball panel there, but they did have a broader panel talking about things, and they revealed there that the Dragon Ball Super manga would return for a one-shot. Now, just because Dragon Ball Super does not have its own panel at this event, that does not mean that it's not going to get any update. However, that does look like that means that there probably won't be an update. So don't get your hopes up for Jump Festa 2026, which is in December. Get your hopes up kind of for the big Dragon Ball event going on in January, because we may or may not get a Super manga update there. Hopefully we do, because the weekly Dragon Ball news people are there. But even if we don't get an update there, what we will probably get is a movie or an anime. So January will still be feeding us Dragon Ball fans something. With that being said, though, Dragon Ball Super will have its place in the attraction zone at Jump Festa 2026. So this is where they're going to basically be giving away stuff, and you can get stuff at the event. So Dragon Ball Super does not have its own panel there. Don't be expecting anything major. If anything does happen, that would be great. Like I said, Dragon Ball didn't have its own panel at the event where they announced the Dragon Ball Super one-shot, so maybe we could be getting a one-shot chapter, or they could just do a quick announcement where they're like, yes, Dragon Ball Super will be returning, and we will talk about it more during the big Dragon Ball Genki Damatsuri event in January with, Toyotaro for the weekly Dragon Ball news. Something like that. That could happen. I don't think it's happening, but it could. So you never know with these sort of things. You never know. They always want to keep those things a surprise, so I don't think we'll be hearing about it until it happens, of course. All right, next let's talk about, in the realm of Dragon Ball Super, the first look at UI Goku and Beast Gohan father-son Kamehameha figure. So pretty cool stuff. Let's just go ahead and take a look here. This looks to be, obviously, because this illustration was created to be turned into a figure, our first look. So it looks pretty good, if I'm being honest. This is a pretty good looking figure. And the thing that I love about this is that this is something that Toyotaro concepted and drew, similar to how he concepted and he basically originated the Bardock and Goku drawing, which was then turned into a figure. I think this is following that same line release or something like that. I'm not too big on the figure scene, so I don't know what the proper phrasing would be. But the point is that this is coming from Varrock, who I think is designing the actual figures. These look amazing. These look amazing, and Toyotaro, his style is perfectly suited to be adapted as a figure. So pretty good stuff here, guys. If you are interested in stuff like this, be sure you pick this up. I wouldn't be surprised if we actually see this in the manga at some point. Goku and Gohan doing a father-son Kamehameha. Maybe against Black Frieza. Now that would be pretty hype. So before we get into the big news concerning Torishima and the Daima stuff, let's get into the first look at Toppo in Gekishin Squadra. So as we always do, I'm just going to let the big reveal play out, and then we'll break down his moveset.
I've made up my mind. There is only being and the absence of being. I'm done fighting for justice. Nothing else matters, only destruction. Time to end this. Witness the power of destruction.
This is a random thought that totally is kind of unrelated to what we just took a look at. But the interesting thing about God of Destruction Toppo that not a lot of people talk about is the fact that he's kind of like Majin Vegeta, because he literally only has this attitude while he's transformed for that one fight, and then after that he kind of is like, yeah, you're right, I was kind of crashing out a little bit. But like God of Destruction Toppo, all of his dialogue and everything, I just think it's kind of funny. It's basically like how we get Majin Vegeta playable, and he has similar crash outs. Very, very interesting how that works. Alright, so this video came courtesy of Bryce Gaming Zone on Twitter. Thank you for the early look, because as a partner to the Gekishin Squadra game creator program, you actually get these early looks, and that's the reason why I said in the last video, these kind of things are going to happen. So we're dealing with Twitter compression on this video, but it still looks pretty good for the most part. Anyways, it says he's a damage character, which makes sense, being the God of Destruction form. A God of Destruction who deals constant damage through branding enemies with the Mark of Destruction. Seize victory for your team by denying enemies their escape and steadily whittling away their strength. His passive is, I won't be fighting for justice any longer. Applies movement speed up to self when moving towards enemies with the Mark of Destruction. The effect is greater the more Mark of Destruction stacks there are. Okay, so I guess you apply Mark of Destructions by hitting the enemy. Rush attack, a physical attack, extends the duration of Mark of Destruction and shortens skill cooldowns. Super attacks excluded. when hitting an enemy with Mark of Destruction. Shortens cooldowns more when the target is an enemy hero. The more Mark of Destruction stacks there are, the more cooldowns are shortened. Okay, so Mark of Destruction. Alright. That's going to be something that you're going to be seeing a lot of as God of Destruction Toppo. Destructive Flash. Fire a barrage of energy blasts in a set direction. Applies Mark of Destruction, like I was saying, to enemies hit. Can move while attacking. Okay, that's pretty cool. So you can move with it. Demolition Tornado. Rapidly rotate to deal a series of strike attacks to the surrounding area. Applies Mark of Destruction enemies hit and deals more damage. The more Mark of Destruction stacks there are, can move while attacking. Dang, so his main thing is going to be like damage over time a lot of the times, and it also is a damage multiplier. Skill 3, Sphere of Destruction Tempered. Assume a fighting stance and unleash an unavoidable energy blast against nearby enemies who attack during it. Applies Mark Destruction to enemies hit, gains extra HP as well as energy defense up in this stance. The more you are attacked while in this stance, the more damage dealt. Ooh, hold up. That kind of sounds like an Ultra... Oh, that sounds exactly like how you would do an Ultra Ego Vegeta character. This is a pretty cool skill. So I could see if the rights issues are resolved and they start doing stuff from the manga, or the manga gets turned into the anime, and we get Ultra Ego Vegeta put into one of these games, they would literally be able to do this. And Ultra Ego Vegeta is basically Vegeta's God of Destruction form, so that is really cool. The more you are attacked while in this stance, the more damage dealt. Jeez, man. I got really excited just now for something that we may never get. Super Attack, Massive Sphere Destruction. Unleash a sphere filled with destructive energy at a set position. The sphere contracts on impact, finishing an explosion that deals extra damage. If the enemy has a Mark of Destruction when hit by the explosion, the entire Mark of Destruction stack will be consumed to deal extra damage. Deals more extra damage the more stacks there are. So, you're going to be wanting to make sure you have as many stacks as possible before you use this super attack, basically, is the point. I believe that's it, right? Yep, that's it. So, I've been really enjoying this Gekishin Squadra video game. It's honestly a lot of fun. I haven't touched it too much lately, and I think the Battle Pass, probably they need to work on the Battle Pass. They need better, cooler skins. A lot of the cool skins are just only purchasable, like the actual alternate outfits. It looks like they only have like recolors in the Battle Pass, which isn't too bad, especially with the Golden Cell recolor. So there's some cool stuff there, but I think, I don't know, I hope Gekishin Squadra does not turn out like the Breakers. It looks like Gekishin Squadra might not need to make as much money in order to live, because I do think it's probably more of a lower budget game. So I don't know exactly how that works, but to my understanding, it's making enough to basically break even or succeed on its own. So I guess we'll see how that ends up. Alright, this is our last story, and I wanted to save it for last because it's kind of major, but at the same time, kind of not. So this was published September 16th, 2025, and the reason why it took me so long to get around to it was because, number one, I was struggling to decide if this was worth talking about, and after some, soul searching, I guess you could say, I decided it is worth talking about just to get it out there, because a lot of people give Torishima a lot of credit because he was the former Dragon Ball editor, so he's got a lot of credit in the Dragon Ball community, I guess you could say. A lot of people hear his opinions and think that they reflect some greater power. I don't know if that's how you would say it, but they're basically giving him a lot of credibility. So if the guy who worked on Dragon Ball in its original state is saying this, then that means my side is right, basically, is where they're coming from. So with all that said, let's get into a statement. The former Dragon Ball editor and Weekly Shonen Jump, I almost said Wall Street Journal, Weekly Shonen Jump editor-in-chief Torishima shares harsh criticisms of Akira Toriyama's final contributions to the series. So this is a bit of, I think the way they're wording this is a little off, considering his comments. So let's get into the comments. It would be better to produce a Vegeta story than Dragon Ball Super. Dragon Ball Daima was a trash anime. Now let's combine this with something Vinixis posted whenever there was an interview done previously and Vinixis translated it. Torishima mocks Daima, and this was March 22nd. Torishima said, this is coming from Vinixis, by the way. Torishima, referring ironically to Dragon Ball Daima, deliberately mispronounces the title as Shiki, a wordplay based on Arumashiki, a Japanese term meaning unworthy or inappropriate. Nakatsuru corrects him, pointing out that the proper title is Daima, but Torishima keeps the joke going, twisting the name into Ayamaru, which in Japanese means to apologize. Essentially, Torishima is having fun playing with the project's title, turning it into words with humorous or negative connotations in a deliberately provocative and joking tone. So that's interesting. That is interesting. So Torishima has very negative opinions about Dragon Ball Daima. Now, the interesting thing about Torishima and the impression I've been able to gather is that obviously he's a harsh critic. He was pretty harsh on Toriyama back in the day, and Toriyama actually at one point was dealing with health issues and he wanted to take a pause or something, and Torishima basically said, nah, you can keep working. That's basically how that story went. If you want a more detailed explanation of that story, I actually detailed it in a video previously. I'll go ahead and link it in the description for you to look at yourself, just so you know I'm not pulling this out of thin air. So basically, I think Torishima hasn't kept up with the wider world of Dragon Ball, because he previously said that he had never read Dragon Ball Super. So with him saying it would be better to produce a Vegeta story than Dragon Ball Super, Dragon Ball Daima was a trash anime, this reads like somebody who didn't watch Dragon Ball Super or read it, because Dragon Ball Super is like a 50% Vegeta story. He has a lot of relevance in it. I don't know what Torishima is talking about whenever he said it would be better to produce a Vegeta story. Is he talking about like a Vegeta prequel? Because if he's talking about like a Vegeta sequel expanding on his character, that's what Dragon Ball Super is. As far as Dragon Ball Z is concerned, Vegeta turned into a good guy like at the very end of the series. And then you find out, oh, well, actually, he was kind of good in the whole Buu saga, and he wanted to be evil again, and blah, blah, blah. You guys know the story. So the point is that Dragon Ball Super has already done a lot expanding on Vegeta's story. Then he says Dragon Ball Daima was a trash anime. And then let's talk about how Anime Updates worded this. So, harsh criticisms of Akira Toriyama's final contributions to the series. I honestly believe, and I am giving Torishima some grace here because, and again, me saying I'm giving Torishima grace is, I know that sounds a little weird, like I'm giving him grace, but I hope you know what I'm trying to say. I'm saying I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. What I'm saying is that I honestly don't know that Torishima is aware of how involved Toriyama is with the franchise. The way Torishima speaks about it, I think that Torishima thinks that Dragon Ball is just run by Toei and Shueisha, and that Toriyama basically has nothing to do with it. That's what I believe that Torishima believes. Now, does he actually believe that? There are some statements that back that up. And what I'm talking about has mainly been done in interviews like this that are in Japanese, so I'm going to have to paraphrase, but essentially, a lot of his negative criticism for Toyotaro, like a lot of the negative story and things like that, a lot of that is Toriyama. A lot of, like Toyotaro has talked about before, his working relationship with Toriyama and how they would trade notes back and forth. So a lot of the stuff Torishima complained about not understanding manga at its core and things like that, that has to do with a lot of the story concepts that Toyotaro came up with Toriyama on. And then you could also say maybe Torishima has a point because Toriyama is a little bit more hands-off, but he's not completely hands-off. Like how he's saying that Dragon Ball Daima was a trash anime. Would he really be saying that if he knew that Akira Toriyama personally worked on it as much as he did? Maybe he would, honestly. Torishima does strike me as the kind of guy who would, because of what we know he's done in the past concerning his criticism toward Toriyama even. But of course, Toriyama was gifted in a whole other league. than Toyotaro. So basically, I wanted to mention this and kind of give my own thoughts on it. I think, and there are people who wrote articles about this and saying, oh, this is a blow to Toyotaro's credibility. This is a blow to the Dragon Ball Daima series. They're basically trying to establish that what Torishima says is law. And Torishima is the final verdict because he was the original editor on Dragon Ball. Torishima was the editor. He was not the writer. Akira Toriyama was the writer and the artist. Torishima had a working relationship with Toyotaro that is not exactly the same. I mean, Torishima had a working relationship with Toriyama. That is not exactly the same kind of relationship that Toriyama had with Toyotaro. It's a bit different. So, we give a lot of Dragon Ball Super, the credit goes toward Akira Toriyama and Toyotaro. With Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, which is just the Dragon Ball in the manga, we give a lot of that credit to Akira Toriyama. We don't give Victory Uchiha credit for Dragon Ball Super. We don't give Torishima credit for Dragon Ball. Now, they worked with the creators, sure, and they pitched ideas or turned down ideas or said, maybe put some action in here. But these guys are not the writers. They are kind of like guides, but that's not even correct. It's really hard to describe what an editor does exactly because they do a lot of stuff. They are gatekeepers who allow you to go in certain areas and not others. They are censors where they tell you that you can't do this or you can't do that. They are guides where they say broad things like, can you bring Cell back? Can you do this, do that? So Torishima is not exactly the end-all, be-all of Dragon Ball, but I don't want to say he has no credibility at all either. I'm just trying to say that him saying Dragon Ball Daima was a trash anime does not mean, oh, that's it, objectively speaking, Dragon Ball Daima was a trash anime. The original editor of Dragon Ball said so. That's not the case. I mean, Nakatsuru animated a ton of Dragon Ball. He is a legend in the Dragon Ball animation world, and obviously he worked on Dragon Ball Daima, and I'm assuming he likes it. I think he does. So what is the point here exactly? You know what I'm saying? I think that this is a big story, and it's worth talking about if this has merit in its substance. But like I said here, I don't think Torishima has seen Super. He doesn't even... I think he said before he hasn't seen Super. He says it would be better to produce a Vegeta story than Dragon Ball Super, but Vegeta has a lot of story in Dragon Ball Super. So I'm not sure if he is exactly up to date on all of his Dragon Ball knowledge, is basically what I'm trying to say. Maybe he did watch Dragon Ball Daima because he's outright saying it's a trash anime, but it had beautiful, gorgeous animation. I don't think anybody can deny that. Maybe he didn't like the pacing, but honestly, personally, I love Dragon Ball Daima, and the pacing was very similar to early Dragon Ball. So that's very interesting that Torishima is like basically saying it's a trash anime whenever it was made to kind of be a tribute to the original Dragon Ball. And then, of course, they borrowed elements from Dragon Ball GT. But anyway, I'm getting a little bit ranty right now, but I just wanted to include this section to basically say, do you agree with him or do you disagree with him? Honestly, let me know in the comments below because this is very interesting. And the phrasing about him sharing his harsh criticism of Akira Toriyama's final contributions to the series, that's another thing I want to talk about. I don't think this is him necessarily criticizing Akira Toriyama's final contributions to the series, because it would be kind of... Honestly, I know Torishima is a bit, I guess you could say, rude or harsh-spoken or whatever. I don't think that if he knew Toriyama was involved with Daima as much as he was, that he would just be going hard on, you know, a legend who is passed on from this earth at this point. Which is why I believe that Torishima is just talking like this because he doesn't think that Toriyama had much to do with the final product. That's my opinion, based off how he's talked about everything. But what do you guys think? Do you think that Daima was a trash anime? Do you think that the Vegeta story that Torishima's talking about, what would that even be? Because if it's a sequel, then that's Dragon Ball Super. If it's a prequel, then a lot of people complain that they don't want prequels. Prequels are kind of bad. Prequels, I don't think prequels are bad, but people just want to see Dragon Ball move forward. So, anyways, guys, a little bit ranty for this last story. I wasn't really sure how to tackle it. There's just a lot of nuance to this conversation. It's like a minefield of like things you shouldn't mention or things you shouldn't say and controversies and things like that. And from what I understand, Torishima has that kind of reputation in the Japanese community because from my understanding, a lot of the Japanese culture is to be polite and not be too harsh. Not like you can never be harsh. Obviously, you would have to be, critical, but they are much more polite than American culture is, from my understanding. Again, this is coming from somebody who has never been to Japan. I don't understand. I'm just going off what other people have said. So, from my understanding, Torishima doesn't exactly fit that mold. So, he's always been harsh-spoken like this, and we've talked about his harsh comments in the past. So, Dragon Ball Daima was a trash anime isn't too crazy of a thing for him to say. I don't agree with it, but I kind of understand where he's coming from because of the criticisms that he's made about like no substance and all that stuff. But then he's also said stuff like Dragon Ball has nothing you can learn from it. Like there's nothing to learn from Dragon Ball. And then he compared it to Tom and Jerry in an interview by DBZ. I think it's db-z.com. I think it's like a French website. I decided not to pull up their quotes or anything like that from the recent interviews they were doing with Toyotaro, Nakatsuru, and Torishima, mainly because the website says not to reproduce their interview. So I'm not going to, obviously, just show it here, but I'm going to talk about what they talked about, which is Torishima talking about how Dragon Ball is like Tom and Jerry, basically. Like, he was talking about how he liked Tom and Jerry. It's just about the action. So, again, just a reminder that Toriyama is the writer. Torishima is not the writer. Torishima thinks Dragon Ball is not basically he just looks at it as an action anime and that's it. He looks at it as an action manga and that's it. Toriyama is the writer. He's the one that came up with all the characters and the dialogue and the moments like Goku passing on and helping Gohan in the final fight against Cell and like all those more emotional moments and stuff. That's Toriyama. And then Torishima would approve it or not. Even though Torishima wasn't involved with the series at that time. You know what I'm saying. Anyways, guys, this video is getting a little bit long, so we're going to go ahead and end it there. What do you guys think about this? Is this crazy? Is this out of pocket? Let me know. I don't exactly understand how to dissect this because there's so much to talk about. So what do you guys think? Go ahead and join in on the conversation below and let me know if you agree with Torishima or disagree, or if he has any room to talk, considering that he said that Dragon Ball, there was nothing to learn from it, and it's mainly, and it is, it is like it is action, but there's much more to it than that, and I don't know. It's just a reminder that Torishima is not the writer, he was the editor. So, yeah. Anyways, guys, that will be it for this video. If you enjoyed, make sure you leave a like, comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe to keep up to date with all things Dragon Ball news and commentary, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace off.